was 21. If you believe what he wrote down on the paper that the sergeant made him sign. Never held a gun, he'd never been too far from home. Never had a night like this in mind. Moved him to the front and left him with one order: don't give up the hole we made you dig. Took a picture out, and then he read some letters, closed his eyes, said, the Lord my shepherd is. Peace comes still and slow, falls like silent snow, swings down sweet and low. Peace comes still and slow. She was on the street and looking for some shelter, beaten down and weary of this world, shivering from the cold, crazy from the voices. She dreams of summers when she was a girl. We live in a world of trials and tribulations, people filled with hatred everywhere. So we bow our heads and we raise our voices, offer our petition in this prayer. Peace come still and slow, falls like silent snow, swings down sweet and low. Peace come still and slow. Peace come still and slow.
Hey everybody, how are you doing this evening? We're so glad that you have joined us for Vespers, a chance when we can gather together again and be reminded that we're not alone. So tonight we light this candle celebrating the presence of Christ who is in us, among us, and beyond us. Remembering all of those in our family of faith and those beyond our family of faith and around the world who are suffering this evening. We're so glad that you have taken time out to be with us this evening on this strange and kind of dreary day. Yesterday was so gorgeous and beautiful. It was nice to just sit outside for a little bit and take a deep breath and to be reminded of the beauty of creation all around us. Today, not quite so much, but no matter what comes our way, no matter what our days may be like, in the little bits and pieces along the day, we know that there is still beauty to be seen. There's still wonders for us to experience, and it's getting a chance to be able to be with good folks like you, even though we're distanced and this isn't really the way we'd like to do things, reminded that we are surrounded by the love of God and by gracious and loving folks too, who care about us. So thanks for being here this evening. Tonight, Mark has taken some time to talk with Reverend Carol Devine. She's the Director of Admissions at Lexington Theological Seminary, but before that she was pastor at Providence Christian Church in Nicholasville, along with some other places and other Disciples of Christ churches. While she was a minister, she started the Green Chalice, which is a group that has grown into many chapters throughout North America, America, part of the Disciples of Christ work and their denomination. So we're grateful that Mark's had a chance to talk with her a little bit about creation care, as we've just observed Earth Day, and we're going to do that again in our worship service in a couple of weeks on May 9th. Reverend Devine will be preaching in our worship service then in just a couple of weeks. So we hope that you'll get a chance to hear a little bit of her heart, a little bit of her experience and how she found the beauty in caring for creation. And then we'll get to hear her again on May 9th. So now let's go to Mark's conversation with Carol.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Vespers, where our special guest is Reverend Carol Devine. Carol's a good friend, but also a very influential minister in the area of creation care, and we are so glad that she is with us tonight. Carol's a native Lexingtonian, graduating from Lafayette, Transylvania University, receiving 2 master's degrees, one from the University of Kentucky and the other from Lexington Theological Seminary, where she is not only an alum, but she has recently joined the staff since 2019 as the director of admissions there. Prior to that, she has served a couple of congregations as a Disciples of Christ minister, most recently just down the road at Providence Christian Church, where Carol and I probably first met each other and became colleagues. And we are so thankful to have her as our Vespers guest this evening. So Carol, welcome. We are thankful for your work and also for this time to talk about creation care. So
thanks so much. Yeah. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your journey with creation care and how you have seen this as such an important priority for our lives.
Well, Mark, as I always tell folks, that if they have a pastor, if they're searching for a pastor who has always wanted to be a minister, then probably they should keep looking, because all of the ministers that I know didn't come easily to answer their call, and I was the same. I was really happy in academia, actually. I was a teacher and really loved that schedule. When I was called to ministry, I went from having all summers off, all weekends off, all holidays off, to the opposite, right? To always working weekends and working every holiday and etc. So I didn't come easily. And also, I was very confused as to why I was called. And I had a lot of conversations with God about that. But it didn't make sense to me until I took a class in seminary called The Body of God, where we were looking at the earth as an extension, as imbued with God's Spirit. And it was in that class that suddenly, I've always been a tree hugger my whole life. But suddenly that tree hugger part of me and my faith came together in a way that it never had. And while I grew up at a fabulous church and had a wonderful minister growing up, I never heard a sermon on care of creation. I never had a lesson on it in Sunday school. That connection had never happened for me. And once it did, it just made sense. And so Disciples, we are organized in the United States and Canada by regions. And one region is the state of Kentucky. And so I went to my regional minister at the time and talked to him, and we had a great conversation. And as a result of that conversation, he called a meeting of any disciple in Kentucky who cared about this. And we actually had both clergy and lay people come from Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, and Central Kentucky. And what we now call Green Chalice was born. And until 2011, Green Chalice ministry, this creation care ministry, was only a ministry of Kentucky. In 2011, it went denomination wide. And so now I serve as the Green Chalice minister, the creation care minister for Disciples of Christ for all of North America.
Wow. What an incredible ministry. And the chalice, for those that may not be familiar, is the symbol of the Disciples of Christ, the DOC branch of the Christian Church. You've seen that chalice as the red symbol on church signs like the South Elkhorn or Crestwood or Central Christian Church. And there's a little cross within the chalice, which reminds us of the importance of the Lord's Supper. And having communion as a part of our Christian community. But then the Green Chalice is broadening that table of communion to remember that it's all of God's earth that is a part of the invitation God has to sit in community with each other.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. It is not some outside of DOC world have said, I always thought that meant you all don't drink.
It's an X over a cup. I got it now. I never thought of it that way, and now I'll never be able to get that out of my mind. Well, I would say something snide about why we don't choose that as our symbol here at Central Baptist Church, but I'll let the listener can interpret as they wish. Well, tell me some of the things that congregations have done in their stewardship of creation care.
We like you all are every disciple congregation has their own expression of how they care for the earth. And sometimes we get in our heads that what congregations must do is recycle, right? That's like one of the first things that come to our minds. But creation care can be everything from church gardens to worship and celebrating creation. There's some churches who have like hiking groups, a hiking ministry. And so it can be solar panels. We have a couple of disciples congregations in California who get 100% of their energy from solar. So it can be anything from something big like that to how we eat and how we get our food and education, outreach. It can be anything.
Yeah, so it's as broad as the great world that we're trying to take care of. There are so many individual and corporate decisions we can make to be more concerned about the creation and how we are living in it. And in your work doing this, what kind of alarms are going off? What are some of the deadlines that you see as in front of us that we need to pay attention to?
You know, Mark, when I first started doing this ministry work in 2007, we really were talking just about how we care for creation and helping us connect our faith with how we act and care for or don't the earth. And that at that point, we started talking about climate change, but it was like climate change is coming if we don't get our act together. Mm-hmm. But now I use the words climate crisis or climate catastrophe, and we've all seen it. We've seen it in the hurricanes, the number of hurricanes, the severity of the superstorms. We have experienced those horrific fires out west and in Australia. So we are currently in a climate crisis or climate catastrophe. And the climate scientists, and I am not one, tell us that we have to make great changes by 2030. That 2030 is a big deadline for us as making great changes to get our carbon to net zero. And to get our carbon to net zero means we have to reduce our carbon impact, which is pollution, how we get our energy, how we get and what foods we eat. So we need to lower our carbon, and then any extra, because there's carbon everywhere, right? So that any extra carbon emissions we have to do some kind of sequestration program, or offsets is the word that we often use, carbon offsets, which is planting trees or caring for or building up marshes and swamps, and any of those. Composting actually is a carbon sequestration act. We're lowering and then capturing to get to that zero. Mm-hmm.
Which is a significant challenge, and whether or not we have the will to do it. But the pandemic may be an illustration of listening to the science and trying to follow the science and having it make an impact in our lives. And so it could be something simple that we could do, like wearing a mask, except in the same way of taking care of creation. What are things individuals can do to help with this reduction of carbon and then sequestering and then re-releasing oxygen into the air?
Yes. So there are two avenues or two main ways that we as individuals impact or contribute carbon. The first and biggest one is our energy use, so electricity in our homes and gas and for our cars. So we're thinking of our homes and workplaces and the energy we use. So how do we reduce that as much as possible, or change the way we get it, like solar and wind or geothermal? The other one is how and what we eat. Actually, our eating has a great impact in carbon, and ag has a great contributor to carbon. So eating more locally, eating more plant-based foods, and reducing how much meat we eat, or how we get our meat. So we know that when we get our meat from smaller farmers, that has a more positive impact on Earth Care than when we get what I call cheap meat.
Yeah.
So it's honestly, I think about just, it's ethical, right? It's moral. How do we eat? How do we live? Is there anything that we do in our day? Is there anything that we do in our day that is separate from our faith? The answer should be no. But we in this country have kind of, and I'm pointing the finger at myself, not out. I have grown up kind of thinking there is my faith and then there is my life, but those cannot be separate. And so as I make any decision of how I eat and what I eat and where I get my food and where I get my clothes and what I do with my trash and all of those things, every one of those decisions should reflect that I'm a follower of Christ. And instead of that being a negative thing, it's just almost like a pause, right? Like all of the decisions I make, there just needs to be a pause. How do I make this decision? How do I do this action faithfully as I'm able to? And when we start doing that, it actually deepens our faith, widens our faith, and is empowering, because then every time I pause, I'm reconnecting myself with God who is in and around me. And it's when I'm making those decisions without pausing, without it being part of my faith, that I'm separating myself from God, right? God's always there, God's always here, and God's always around, but I can choose to separate myself from God. When I pause and make those decisions as a reflection of following Christ, then I'm reconnecting over and over again. You know, we talk about, we want to pray without ceasing. And how do we define prayer? It's not just when we bow our heads, it's how we live. So every time I pause and make a decision based on my faith, I'm reconnecting with God, and it is an act of prayer.
You know, I really like the way that you're integrating spirituality with creation care, because it can feel overwhelming and exhausting to do all these tasks and feel like maybe we're not making enough traction or impact into this big global problem. But when we see it as rooted in our relationship to God as a way of living more deeply into God's love, then that kind of becomes intrinsically valuable, even though it can have so many other impacts to the contribution of what we're doing to try to stem the tide of the climate crisis. It also then renews our own idea of this relationship that we have with God that is life-giving and transformative. So I really like that integration, because it's not merely about duty. So often religion's about, checking the boxes, doing all these things right. But it's really more about living richly into a God that doesn't have scarcity.
Yes, God of abundance in every way, shape, or form, including energy, right? Mm-hmm. God gives us free wind and solar and geothermal, and it doesn't end. It's a forever kind of thing, and yet we look instead to our own ways. But that's a whole nother subject. But I also, you and I were speaking earlier about the grief that we are carrying as not just even a nation, globally, the grief that we're carrying coming out of this pandemic. As we began to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we are grieving for a lot of loss. One of my daughter's friends just had a birthday, and she just turned 23. And she said, I want to redo. I want to do 22 again, because I didn't get to, have my 22nd year. And that's how we feel, right? Like, I've lost a year, and I've lost jobs. I've lost people that I've loved. And sometimes that loss of people, I wasn't able to attend funerals and process the way that we do. It has been so heavy and so much loss that we carry that in our bodies, and it's really important to process. But not only do we have grief from the pandemic, we have grief from racial injustice that we have experienced as a nation in particular, in not just this last year, but carrying that. And then we have this ecological grief, because the climate, the environment, weather is different now than it was when I was a kid, and it's not going to go back. And so there's grief from that. And it's really important as pastors that we keep reminding ourselves and others, we have to process this grief. We have to do the work to take care of ourselves. But the good news is, one of the best ways to take care of our spirits is to get out of nature. And so when we sit under a tree in our yard, when we dig in the dirt, I had a wonderful church member who said, you can't feel bad if your hands are digging in the dirt. I love that image, But whether we're digging in the dirt or sitting under a tree, taking a walk or hiking, canoeing, whatever our thing is, when we're out in nature, our spirits are cleansed and healed, and it's just like a hug, from God. So I just encourage everybody at Central Baptist to take that in and think, am I taking care of my spirit? I've undergone a lot of grief, and I need to process that. My oldest son actually is an ICU nurse in Louisville, and he was on the COVID unit of his hospital. And so he's a young man and in his mid-20s. So it was a lot. He saw a lot of death and a lot of suffering, and it was a lot for him, to carry. But he, the way that he was able to deal with it, he's a big kayaker, and he kayaks whether it's winter, summer, spring, it doesn't matter. And one of the ways that he just made sure, he started with feeling heavy. The next day off, he'd be out on the water. And I think that's honestly the way that he is able to still be upright and moving forward. So all of us, though, have experienced that and will continue to experience that eco-grief, pandemic grief, injustice of all sorts grief. It's important for us to then get out. And then the good news is, Mark, when we get out and connect with God's good earth, then we're reminded, oh yeah, I want to protect this. I want to care for this. This is really important, right? I want everybody to have access to this. So it's like this positive cycle forward when we do that.
No, I think that's exactly right. So as you were describing that, I was having two images. One image of doing grief work poorly is eating a lot of processed food or fast food or junk food to try to make us feel quickly okay, or kind of, disappearing into our screens with watching too much television or looking at social media, or, buried into this electronic, artificial environment, or eating healthier, getting a little bit of exercise and fresh air, and doing grief work in the way in which it can truly be processed. And that is by having a larger vision of seeing my connection with things, to not be so isolated and reach out and have community and friends, and make those kind of connections important in my life. And to do that as a part of the reflection of the gift of life in the beauty and surrounding that God has given us, are renewing. And maybe that's one of the great things we've learned from the pandemic, is that taking time away from work or to do those kind of enriching experiences are vital to our well-being and the well-being of our planet.
Yes.
Well, this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate the time that we've shared. And for those of you that are watching tonight, be looking in your calendar for May the 9th, where Reverend Devine will be our guest preacher for that morning service at 11 o'clock on Mother's Day. And as we think about honoring and giving thanks and gratitude to God for our personal mothers, we're also being reminded to give thanks to God for the Mother Earth that also sustains us and nurtures us and has given us life. And it'll be a good day for us to be reminded of all the ways that God has birthed us and cared for us and loved us. So we look forward to that time with you and to hear more from you. And I really appreciate this time that we've shared today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. And I so look forward to being with you all again on Mother's Day.
Thanks, Carol. We'll see you later.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Mark, and thank you, Reverend Devine, for taking time out to share with us about your work with creation care, and for giving us such a gracious and wonderful reminder about how just taking some time to get back out in nature can maybe help spark and rekindle a love if within us, and an impetus to really care for creation all around us. So as I was listening to Mark and Carol talking, it made me think about this song, and so sing along if you want this good old Woody Guthrie tune. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking the ribbon of highway, I saw above me an endless skyway. I saw below me a golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of the diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Well, thank you all for being here this evening. It's been great to get to be with you again. It's wonderful to get to hear from Mark and from Reverend Devine as well. We'll be back on our YouTube channel on Sunday for our virtual worship service. We invite you to join us then as we continue to worship together. If there's other ways that you'd like to connect through Zoom groups, through Sunday school classes and Thursday school classes and baby boomers that's meeting as well, you can find links to all those things. If you go to our website, you'll find folks that you can contact so that you can get involved. You can also go and sign up for our welcome form on our website, or get our newsletter as well, so that you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. Well, we'll see you again on Sunday. For now, go in peace.